At this point, I'll now switch to our afternoon speaker, which is Tanja Coleman from the Art Gallery of Western Australia. So Tanja, if you could share your screen, please.
Yep, and you can see my screen. So hopefully on the screen you have permissions to pixels. That went excellent. Hi, everyone.
Nicely.
Awesome. Hi, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Lisa, for inviting me. I got to sit on the first session on Monday and already excited about the updates, particularly with Excel lists and formatting, and have shared some of those with my workmates already, and now already writing down notes about the training, the online training session. So thank you. Definitely all worthwhile joining my first VUG today. So just a little bit about a registration team. As Paul mentioned, I work here at the Art Gallery of WA. I'm one of the assistant registrars here, and we look after the logistics and the documentation for exhibitions, loans, and we also coordinate the image and copyright reproductions for the gallery and external clients. We're a small team working on a big program, pretty much I'm sure like a lot of you out there are doing today. Even as we meet this morning for the Vernon User Group, the gallery has a major redevelopment underway. That's due to open January 2021, so just a couple of months away. You'll see here that the gallery rooftop has been converted into a multi-purpose sculpture garden, exhibition and entertainment space. And in the basement, new conservation laboratories are being constructed and our galleries are getting a makeover. As you can see just on the right of the screen there, we're sanding the wooden floorboards in one of the exhibition spaces and removing the blinds so that you can see out. The door walls will go in place to maintain all the appropriate lighting conditions. And of course, we remain open throughout all of this. As you can see on the screen there, the hoarding in front of our gallery on the left, a lovely little coffee pickup spot on the right. So you might imagine some of the challenges that are in play throughout all of this. But I'm not going to talk about the redevelopment project or all of those building projects. I'm going to look at another one of our very important, ongoing and very much anticipated projects, the AGWA online, State of Collection online. And I'll highlight why we finally moved on the project and some of our earlier endeavours for moving online, and of course the challenges and learnings along the way. With art, our focus, I'll hone in on some of the image and the permissions cleanups that we undertook as well along the way. So though, a little bit about our collection. Annually, the collection expands through our acquisitions program. We're currently sitting at around 18,000, just over 18,000 works, not as many as probably some of the collections that are listening in today, but for us that feels big. And it's around just under 5,000 artists form that collection. The curatorial focus is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, international and contemporary art. And we do maintain a register of hard copy files, as well as all of the artist and artwork records are held on our Vernon CMS. But our collection stores are at capacity, and this impacts also on what people can see in the gallery. So you can see here our permanent collection displays. These can only accommodate a small percentage of the collection at any one time. Visitors at the moment will have access to 5%, probably a little bit less with all of the works that we've got going on of the collection during a visit to the gallery. These stats are, may sound alarming, and there could be enough to make the Office of the Auditor General sit up and take note. And they did that. I'm going to share this with you. It's available out there online. The Office of the Auditor General, basically what they did was they published an audit report on the management of the state art collection. And these issues were not new to the gallery, as we sort of try to problem solve this every day. And you can see here, though, that they made recommendations specific to our collection and how we make that accessible to the public. And they said by the end of June 2019, we are to further our objective of making works accessible. AGWA should develop and start implementing a plan to display artworks in alternative locations and online. But what about our online endeavours so far? It's not like we just haven't been doing anything despite the auditor's reports. The gallery previously had a small online collection portal, and it was developed using the Vernon CMS browser. Eventually, this is like many years ago, well, probably like over 10, 12, 15 years. Eventually, the staff working on that project left the gallery, and the portal, although accessible, sat for many years with a very small number of works available. Meanwhile, an ever-increasing demand for images and image reproductions continued. Fast forward to 2019, sort of end of 2018, and the gallery was ready to unveil the results of a 6-year major visual arts research development project called Desert River Sea Portraits of the Kimberley, which I hope you can see on the screen here. Awesome. This included a dedicated website and a portal as well that you can see. So the collection, the AGWA collection was put online. My colleague Melanie here in the registration team worked really hard on clearing all of the copyright permissions and getting works photographed, and about half of the AGWA collection is now online. So that was, and actually that was the goal. They met the goal as well. So it wasn't just that half, they got the goal up. So this was a major step forward. However, this project, as well as the smaller collection portal, were both projects that had additional funding through grants and sponsorship. So it was actually around the time that the Desert River Sea opened that we invited Lisa from Vernon to Perth to do some online training. We had staff from across all departments, so it just wasn't collection management. We had marketing, engagement, records, foundation, of obviously registration. So it was an opportunity to bring everyone together in the one room. At the training, Lisa shared what some of the other sites are doing or were doing with the browser, particularly looked at Sargent's site, and this caught the attention of the community engagement team. Good news, so even though our little smaller online collection portal, like it was small, we had a couple of hundred works on there that had funding earlier, and we had checked all the data, photographed work, written extended labels, so that was all up. So that was ticking away in the background. And the good news is it was licensed and it was part of the budget. We had this browser that we could use. So even though we didn't have a huge staff resource to draw on, we had the staff, such as the engagement team, with an online focus to now take the entire collection online. And I sort of think about it that just as collection managers here, sometimes we just think about the work that we're doing and sort of can't see a way around it, and we bring together other staff. It took an all-in-gallery focus, or they came together at training and realised that there are other ways to push things along. So with the training complete, an online collection meeting was quickly called. It was a very, very cobbled together little agenda just to get a small bunch of us, someone from registration, someone from the engagement or marketing team. We had a curator, literally one person from a few teams came into that meeting. And we set about a very loose timeline and drafted a template. And soon we learnt that the project was considered core business and expected to be completed with existing staff and resources. Now, our registration team had taken a hit 1 year earlier, losing the collection stores coordinator along with the collections database officer. The engagement team, with this in mind, was to lead on the look and the branding, and our team in registration would look after the data management. The curatorial manager was to provide advice and guidance about the collection, and as the project progressed, we drew on a wider group within the gallery to provide advice and feedback. From May 2019 onwards, we set up regular online meetings with Paul from Vernon, remote accessing our database. Thanks, Paul. And working through our design template, we were able to identify the Vernon field names specific to AGWA use and make adjustments. And Paul worked what I thought seemed like some magic in the back end with updates and user symbolics and coding, and I provided some very basic queries relating to image and reproductions. I guess is where I got a bit more of an understanding of the database as well, with just understanding the language, well, at least being exposed to a little bit more about that. We certainly never set out to overhaul, though, every object and artist record. It became clear early on that sort of the key data for our 18,000 plus records is fairly clean. We already had mandatory fields in place for new acquisitions. So when a curator entered a new work onto the database, they had to put in the artist name and the date, the object and the object type and the department, the classification, etc. You know, it may needed some updating, but there weren't great gaps in that area. Some dates needed to be fixed. We didn't really use place made or record as such the exhibition history. That was more noted through the location, so where the work was held or displayed, but it's something that we've got in mind sort of for future down the track. But what the team did agree on was that we would publish select fields. So for every single record, the select data would go online. However, we'd only publish the image if it met our criteria around quality and permissions. So you can see here we're preparing the one of the recent acquisitions, Alex Israel's large and heavy fiberglass painting that flew in from overseas into storage and then unpacked and set up for photography. So onto pixels or the image. The gallery has always prioritised photographing the collection, doing so as works are required. But there are, of course, exceptions, particularly when works aren't so straightforward. As you can see, one of my favourite works here, Paul Caporn's work on the right, Unsupportable, an foam scissor lift made out of EVA foam. The amazing thing is that we use a scissor lift just like that to get the work up. So something like that, we can only photograph that when it's actually displayed, when we put it up. Over time, the gallery has moved on from 35mm negative formats. We still maintain that, and the 5:4 transparencies, CDs, etc. We don't tend to pull those out unless we're a bit desperate. But they're a great resource. I don't mean desperate in a bad way. I just mean if we really just want to see something, or we really just need to get a scan. We've moved from the negative through to the DNG raw files that we maintain on our DAMS, our digital asset management system. So we have the Vernon CMS, and then we have another system holding all of the high-res image files. But how do we get this image from that DAMS onto Vernon, or just how do we getting an image onto Vernon, is that it's a scan or a lower res copy from the DAMS, but sometimes we find that we come across happy snaps attached to a record on Vernon. So while this, say, photo of the plate is great as an ID record, it's not what we consider, it's not a clean image for us to go on the browser. The work in the middle is a little bit blurry, the edges of the background are shown, and similarly on the far right, we have the rack that it was hung on for photography. And often there are other times where a whole image is cropped as well. So clearly an issue for our online browser. We began cross-checking close to 4,000 images due to go live, and we were replacing any that aren't up to scratch. Going forward, we created a new drop-down authority term, which is called approved image for online browser under the usage restriction. We did this because how we use Vernon was mostly internal. We would put an image onto Vernon, put no public access. The image might just be for ID purposes so that, we could meet some of our, obligations for being able to track our work, insurance, etc. And so if the image was put on, it was just very, very basic, and we didn't know necessarily if that was the correct image. We could see if it was good or not, but whether that was approved. So we've created that now. Similarly, we realised we needed an image standard for exporting images from the DAMS for the Vernon record. So our photographer and our DAMS officer were super helpful on this front, and after discussions with Vernon, we actually got a photographer who's actually a contract photographer now, comes on a couple of days every month. We got Bo, we put her in touch with Paul at Vernon to talk about, have discussions about image size, resolution and compression, because to be honest, that's not necessarily my forte. I understand very little bit about that. And then our DAMS officer was able to translate these to set pixel image converter parameters. It's a mouthful. Or put more simply, create a 150i DPI JPEG landscape and create a 150 DPI JPEG portrait. So you can see here, we decided that the longest side should be 2000 pixels. So rather than because sometimes we have an assistant come in, upload, take the works off the DAMS, put it onto Vernon, and we've just taken the guesswork out of that. So they can just do that. And that's all come about through this project. So as the project also progressed, we set about re-strategizing some of our monthly photography sessions. We didn't have extra money, but there were little downtimes or gaps. So we identified works that were out of copyright and we photographed these, hoping to have some more images by the time we go live. When the gallery began using the database, its purpose was very much internal, as I mentioned. So we've had to rethink the entire way we manage the file output, or the image file output and documentation, and this time with the public very much in focus. So permissions. I don't know what it's like at your workplace, but mention the word copyright and there are groans. So I mentioned that to my colleague yesterday and she said, well, that's usually just our office is the ones dealing with it, but no, it's out there. In Australia, much like elsewhere, artistic works are protected under the Australian Copyright Law or Copyright Act. Sourcing copyright permissions often takes time to coordinate and it costs the gallery, our gallery, fees, can cost the gallery fees. Slowly though, our colleagues, the image users, are understanding the rights of artists and our obligation as a collecting institution to maintain best practice in this area. You may or may not be surprised to hear that about 50% of our state art collection is still in copyright or the status is unknown. So we are proactive, however, in seeking copyright licenses and after every acquisition meeting, and no longer do we ask artists to sign over all their rights in the form of assignment copyright that you can see on the gallery here. Basically, back in the day, we would do that and it meant we could do whatever we wanted. Instead, we work with non-exclusive licenses on the right here. And also the update of that is that it does mention online and electronically transmitting the work. Previously, that wasn't covered in an agreement. Often we need to follow up and sometimes the artist puts conditions on the use, such as website only, great for the browser, or they may flat out say no. And so we have to contact them each time we're looking to use the image. When approval is granted, the rights type is updated in the Vernon object record. And you can see that here with the Alex Israel acquisition, fairly recent acquisition, international. So that's there, it has the non-exclusive 2007, I should say. A little screenshot from our database. You can see over the years the types of licenses that we have been using. You can see the NELS 2007 that I mentioned, the AGWA website only, and also we have the online license. And that was created for the ATSI collection portal where many of the works are represented by a copyright agency, or as many of us still know it as VUG or another licensing agency. It's really important that we've put that there, I should say, online here, is because that actually has a fee for each image per use. And then we have open as well, which is actually our way of describing works that are out of copyright. With Paul, we actually did a bit of a search and found all the works on our database that may not have had that open status, and we bulk updated that so that we had some of the rights type a little more up to date. So now to find works in the Vernon database suitable for the online collection, we just need to search for, combine the search of the copyright type and the photo audiovisual repro format, which Cumulus, our DAMs, and that's the agreed location for where we will pull images suitable for the database. Currently we have just over 4,000 records with the combined image and necessary permissions in place to be able to publish the image online when we go live. For any other record, we would publish the data only. I'm just going to give you a quick look at our draft test site. So we do have that, and I've got permission to quickly show that to you. So I'm just going to change my screen over here. Can you see that? Where it should say explore the collection. So yeah, on the home page, oops, it might take me back to the website. So we'll just go back again. Just give me a moment. Here we go. Oh, okay, yeah, we can see if I just type in here. So Monaro, so Rosalie Gascoigne, you would have seen that on the home page. This work does actually have some extended text, and all of our collection will have that there. So you have the 4 panels. This is actually going to be seen at the NGA very soon in the Know My Name exhibition. So that's gone out on loan. It came straight off our walls over to the NGA. We can click on the artist here and see all the other works. And you'll see here, if a work doesn't have the necessary permission in place, you won't see the image. So, I mean, yes, I'm sure we're probably one of the last collections to put our go online. So I won't sort of take you through that. It won't be new to a lot of you, but for us, it is a big deal. We get asked for updates regularly from the executive. When are we ready? So I'll go back to these. I'll just come back here. Just bear with me. I was going to come back to the presentation. So you can see that here. So just to sort of to close some of our learnings and challenges, along the 18-month journey, we have faced some hurdles. Some are unavoidable, probably others less so, with better planning. We did actually have our IT services migrated along the way, which meant we lost the capacity to remote access in to Vernon for several months, obviously delaying updates and exports required for the browser development. But when we could remote in with Vernon, other opportunities, sort of housekeeping opportunities, would come up completely unrelated to the browser. And this could be meant that we could just get onto some of those things on the spot and fix them. I'll just come through here. Just how also, as we near design completion, we've thrown Vernon a curveball. Our branding is going to be changing, so we're having complete rebranding of the gallery. So what you see here on the screen with the AGWA 6 Seasons, AGWA Unlimited, AGWA Modern, which also translates to the browser site, that's changing. So watch this space. That also reminds us to be realistic with timelines, expect the unexpected, and yes, so that's really just hot off the press as well. And I must say, one of the really nice things to come out of the project is that we've started wider gallery conversations about image standards and data entry. Some of the good news since the staff cuts rocked our team is that we were able to appoint internally a stores coordinator, and today, in fact, in probably half an hour, we will have a new Vernon database or collections database officer starting. So we're really excited about that and where that can take us. And yeah, I really hope to see you online and perhaps on our database or our collection online soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanja. That was great. I just wanted to add a few things for extra context for the project. So all the Vernon browser projects we work with rely on a key feature in Vernon called user symbolics. They're basically calculated fields that let you take the rich and complex data structure that's in Vernon and change how that data is presented. The way that the public views the collection isn't going to be the same as a curator working internally. And so we see some examples of that within the AGWA project. One example is the location history is very detailed in Vernon, showing every storage location and lender that's ever been involved, lenders and borrowers of artworks coming in and out. Within the AGWA site, we have a simple filter that allows the public to see the works that are on display or not on display. And that's an example of one of these calculated fields. It's simply looking at the current location of the object, and if it's in a display location, then on the website it just shows as on display, and that's as much as the public will need to know. Another example would be the departments, which in AGWA correspond to those broad display areas that we saw in the gallery. And so those department names within Vernon aren't exactly as the public would see them. The descriptions are slightly longer, and some of them are historical namings within Vernon. And so in Vernon, we've again set up alternative names for those departments, and these calculated fields then present that alternative name to the public, which is something that's going to make more sense to their end user.
Absolutely.
The images themselves, Vernon Browser lets you set what size the public have access to, and it's automatically resizing those as part of the publication status. So although AGWA's done a huge amount of work to connect the highest resolution to the system, there's still another step after that, which is in the publishing step to Vernon Browser, that's resized down to the size that AGWA want to make available to the public users, which isn't necessarily going to be as high a resolution as the internal staff have access to. And then lastly, Vernon Browser as a product is a responsive design. It fits whatever the screen space is available of the end user. So in Tanya's example, she's zoomed right out on the website, so you can fit a huge number of works on a single page, whereas the default view is larger text and larger images and responds to whether you're on a mobile or a tablet. And then individual users can just use the generic control plus and minus keys to set their own preference for that particular browser site. I wondered if there's anyone in the audience that has any particular questions for Tanya. If you do, then just send them through via the chat message and I can relay them. As Tanya noted, the next step for us is a bulk renaming of the gallery spaces department categories because of the rebranding. Those name changes are altering, and so we'll be doing an update in Vernon to say, well, the names that the public see are now going to be this, and then that'll be what gets published. So that's something that we're scheduled to do next week.
Mm-hmm.
I can also put out a more general call as to whether there's any other questions that have come up from any of the topics this week that you would like to post to us. As part of the online user group meeting, we will be sharing a survey next week to allow you to give feedback on the format, propose changes that you do in the future, tell us what worked and what didn't. We also have clients around the world, so we'll be rolling this format out to the UK, where we have a full-time staff member managing all of our European sites, Alex Vonderbeck. So he'll be running that later this month, and we'll be sharing a lot of the same presentations that we've developed for the Vernon side of things, and then getting local UK client talks as part of his online conference. Fortunately as well, the South African clients, of which we have many, are in almost the same time zone, so they'll be able to fit in on that, as well as some of our Eastern Seaboard US sites. So there haven't been any more specific questions at this point. I'll just share my screen as well. So thank you very much, Tanya. That was great to see the project. I think a particular challenge with online collection projects is just the sheer volume of material to work through. And that's certainly the case for AGWA, that there's so much to do with rights clearance and data cleanup that it is an ongoing process, really, that, as you say, around a third of the collection currently has rights clearance, and that'll continue to extend over the coming years.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been great. And good to point out all of those, the more sort of tech side of it. I thought I'd leave that with you, and if anyone had questions, that would come up. And we're just looking forward to having something ready for the public to look at online, and maybe even in the gallery, hearing what, again, Sargent's doing in their site. It's all about accessing the collection. So thank you.
We have been helping a couple of New Zealand sites get visitor stats on their collections, and it makes an enormous difference to the exposure for a museum. We've seen sites where they're getting tens of thousands of views on their website through the online collection when they're really tiny museums that almost have no profile otherwise. And that's just because you've got that sheer volume of content, which is providing a discovery point for search engines like Google. People are searching for things and then finding those museums or galleries, not because they know them, but because they've got a collection item which is of interest to them.